Hello, it's the Great Game Bagel here, coming to you with a slightly different video. This is, well, my tier list of the 2022 Conservative leadership candidates, because, as many of you who would be watching this who are members of the Conservative Party would know, ballots have been started to get mailed out. In full disclosure, I am myself a member of the party, and I have just recently gotten my ballot. So, since ballots are coming out and people will be voting, it feels fitting that I put a tier list out, because, well, I cover the race quite frequently, so it seems natural that I would have opinions on how to rank these candidates. Now, what I do not want people to use this video as is just a copying my position verbatim. If you agree with my arguments on why different candidates are a different position, by all means, follow my lead, but think about it critically. That is the important thing. If you disagree with me at any stage, by all means comment below and we can have a perfectly civil and respectful discussion. There are candidates that I would not vote for if they were the leader of the party, and there are candidates that I would. But we can still have a respectful discussion on as to why. But with no further ado, let us begin. So first off here, we have Scott Agentson. So, what is Scott Agenson's shtick? What is his selling point? What is he telling people that he is going to do? Well, the best I can tell from all the statements I've seen from him, his campaign, public positions taken, is that he, generally speaking, is a vanilla conservative, i.e., he doesn't particularly have any notable positions, any hard stances. He doesn't diverge from conservative orthodoxy particularly much. The only thing maybe a bit interesting on that is he, I believe, is strongly against Bill 21 in Quebec and strongly supports walking in things like pride parades. But other than small, trivial things like that, and yes, federal parties opposing Bill 21 is relatively trivial because the feds can't do anything about it, so regardless of how you feel about the bill, a federal party taking a stance that it is bad seemingly is irrelevant. Not only is it a provincial law affecting provincial organizations, but it is also notwithstanding claused, so I don't know what to expect. I don't know why people were talking about it at all. Like, they can't do anything about it. But that is not what Agentson is running as. He's not running being like, I am a vanilla conservative. Because if you did, that's a dumb way to campaign. No one votes for vanilla. His pitch has always been that he wants to restore civility to politics. He thinks that political debate, political discussion, election campaigns in general have gotten too bloodthirsty, too angry, and people are not respecting each other's opinions. All of this is all nice to say. And it's easy to say it. No one likes when politics is excessively hostile. However, this is an important however, what he says is almost entirely toothless. Being civil and respectful unilaterally won't change anything. Even if the other parties act the same way, it's just superficial. Because the underlying reason why in Canada politics is getting more hostile is the same reason that it's more hostile in the US. And there is a good reason why people will point down and be like, importation of US style politics. It's not because candidates are importing US style politics, it's that Canada and the US, particularly the English-speaking portions of both countries, are effectively the same culture. What culturally affects Canada cascades to the US. What culturally affects the US cascades to Canada. Ethnic groups, which Anglo-North Americans are, do not care about borders. It propagates regardless. So it is not top-down politicians bringing American-style arguments to Canada. It is the underlying grassroots of the parties getting cultural osmosis from the US that is causing this breakdown in civility. Now, what is going on in the US? Why is there a breakdown in civility in the US? Fundamentally, it's that the left wing in the US and the right wing in the US fundamentally and significantly do not agree on basic facts. The reason for this is that the Republican Party has stayed constant in its median view on the world, and the Democratic Party has moved significantly to the left as the left-wing grassroots in the US has moved significantly to the left. And you look at many issues that exist. This is not an exhaustive list, but it is some of the more contentious issues. So the first one, and most contentious because it's the most recent and most relevant one, which is the issue of abortion. Fundamentally, Republicans in the US, or conservatives in a more general term, view that the life of a person begins at conception, and in broad terms, the left views that life begins at birth. This is not entirely true in either group. There are conservatives who do not have that view, and there are liberals who don't have that view. It's more smeared. But the important thing in this discussion is not who is right or wrong, per se. That depends on your ideology and your perspective. To understand why it's getting so heated is that this is a fundamental fact dispute. There is no compromised position between life begins at conception and life begins at birth, or any other point in time you want to pick. There is no compromised position. Life either begins A or B. And that is the basis to the problem. One issue, though, would not cause a breakdown in civility. You also see this in other issues. With guns. This is also heavily already influenced Canada. Abortion is more of a newer thing coming across the border to Canada. And by new, I mean the argument and the debates are more... There's a more recent cultural osmosis. But guns has been a big topic for a while in Canada. Generally speaking, conservatives view gun control as an ineffective and potentially tyrannical solution to a problem, which is murder or crime. And left-wingers, generally speaking, think gun control does work and that you do not have a right to guns. And specifically in the US, right-wingers believe you have, based on the Second Amendment, the right to have weapons to overthrow a tyrannical government or resist a foreign invasion. That is straight from the Federalist Papers, straight from the Bill of Rights in the US. This is, again, a fundamental fact-based dispute. If one group, the conservatives, think gun control physically doesn't work, and the other group physically thinks it does work, well, you can't have a compromise on that, because it doesn't make sense, and it doesn't do anything. If you compromise, for example, let's say bump stocks, you ban bump stocks. Okay, it doesn't actually affect the underlying issue, because one camp still thinks it doesn't work, and one camp still thinks it does work. And the end goal of gun control is banning all guns. Because it doesn't, if you believe in that, it does not make sense to have any guns. Because if your logic is any guns, civilian access to guns increases murder, any civilian access increases murder. So the end goal of that position is a total ban. The end goal of the right-wing conservative position is a total unban. Now, that is not to say you can't have a few particular things like banning criminals and stuff like that. That's completely different. But the idea that certain guns should not be allowed to be purchased or whatever is fundamentally black and white. Either you should be able to buy arbitrary guns as long as you're law-abiding, or you shouldn't. There's no compromise position. We go to another one, another contentious one. Climate change. Generally speaking, most people these days believe the climate is in fact changing, though there is, it seems, some more growing disagreement on whether it's getting warmer or colder, but that's a whole other issue altogether. But the fact that it is changing seems uncontested. The disagreement, though, and this is a really big disagreement, left-wingers think, generally speaking, that in the short term, the world will collapse. Some people say 2030, some 2050, some 2100. I've heard numbers in between all those dates too. That if we don't do X by this date, humanity will go extinct eventually, and there will be nothing we can do. Right-wingers, conservatives, typically do not believe this and believe the opposite. That's not going to happen. That's ludicrous. It might cause inconvenience to certain groups. Let's say, for example, the sea levels rise, so you get to abandon some coastal communities. Inconvenient to some groups, but fundamentally not an existential problem. Just like a hurricane. A hurricane can cause people to die, property destruction, but it's not an existential threat. And that's the basic disagreement there. It's an existential threat if you're left-wing, and it's not if you're conservative. And if you're talking about sacrificing a lot of things for something you don't think is an existential threat, which is what carbon taxes and all these regulatory hurdles that Trudeau's government has brought in, but those do exactly that. They cause a lot of pain to regular people in the belief that this is an existential threat to humanity. But if you don't believe it's an existential threat to humanity, you are oppressing people for no purpose. Which is, generally speaking, the mainstream Canadian conservative position. Climate change isn't an existential threat. So things like carbon taxes, even if they did work, are not justified. I could go on, there's more issues, but they'll just use these three. All of these are fundamental fact-based disagreements between the two sides, and you can't fix the discussion and the discourse until you convince a critical mass of people which one position is correct. So, Agentson's entire basis as a candidate that we should be more civil and more respectful is pointless and hopeless, because the only way that could work is if people agreed on these facts. And considering the grassroots of the Conservative Party disagrees with the grassroots of the Liberal Party on this, the only thing he could do rhetorically speaking, is concede to the Liberal position. I'm not saying he would do this, but it is what O'Toole did. He conceded to the Liberal position, which is a betrayal of conservatives and their worldview. So, all this to say, I don't really see a particular problem with Agentson. I don't dislike him. I don't think there's anything wrong with him. He seems like a perfectly reasonable politician and a perfectly reasonable person. But I could not support him for leader because I do not think his position makes much sense. And I don't believe he will be successful in anything he's saying. Unless he capitulates, in which case he will be betraying me. Because I don't agree with these left-wing positions. Or else I'd be voting for the Liberal Party if I agreed with them. So with that, he is D tier to me. Now, this is not D tier as in he's a terrible person. Or that I wouldn't vote for him. It's D tier that I don't think he would be effective. I think he would be a bad leader. And in fact, I am doubtful he could even win an election. Now, we have no data for this, so I cannot say that for certain, but it is what it is. Now, on to Rowan Baber. So, what's Baber's shtick? Well, he was a former provincial MP from Ontario who stood up against the Ford government's COVID rules and was evicted from the PC party. Didn't stand for re-election in 2022 and is now running as a Conservative leadership candidate. So he's probably the lowest profile of all of the candidates prior to the race. And his real stick of the campaign is that he sees that the federal government is getting more authoritarian and harsher crackdown with things like specifically speech, COVID rules, etc. He seems to, broadly speaking, be what I would describe as a right blue Tory. He's by no means a social conservative, though he is friendly to them. But he is to the right of the blue Tories. Because, generally speaking, he has the hard stance that there should have been no lockdowns, in broad terms. And that the feds and the provinces were wrong in doing these and caused destructive policies not just on workers and businesses, but on children who we cannot even quantify the damage caused by the loss of education and young kids not being able to socialize properly. We can't even begin to quantify what damage this has done yet. But it seems bad. There's an economics paper recently that the school shutdowns and the distance schooling by the pandemic might have been the most disastrous policy decision ever. A bit hyperbolic, perhaps, but by all means, strong position, or strong warnings. Overall, I quite like Baber. I think he seems to be genuine. He seems to be well-read and well-respected, or well-informed on a lot of these positions. And he seems to have a strong, concrete worldview, and I think he would be an effective communicator in a general election. Would he be successful? I have no idea. But we will see going forward, perhaps, if he did win. Now, we get to the wrinkle here. Does he have a potential of winning? That's hard to say. He's polling very mediocre, so it's unlikely he could even win the race. And that puts some question on, is it a problem to rank him? Because unlike some people say, there is a spoiler effect in a race like this. I have an entire video about ranked ballots that we can discuss, that discusses that. Generally speaking, though, based off the polling I've seen, the modeling I've done, I don't think ranking him should theoretically be a problem. for example, because by polling from a Main Street poll, the Baber supporters overlap very heavily with Poilievre supporters in the type of conservative they are. It's very unlikely that voting for Baber would hurt Poilievre, except if you really want Poilievre to win in the first round, in which case, again, that could still hurt Poilievre. But Poilievre's eventual win does not seem like it would be impacted by Baber if you voted him before Poilievre. However far ahead you ranked him. So with that, I'm going to put Baber in A tier. I don't think there's anything wrong with Baber. I think in a hypothetical race with certain other candidates not on it, I could see myself voting for him first. But there are concerns. I don't know how well he could do federally, because I don't really have polling on this. And he seems a relatively new and a bit reserved. And I'm not 100% certain how effective a reserved person would do federally. Though that is not entirely indicative of bad performance. Scheer was relatively reserved, but he did better than O'Toole. And Scheer also generally took harder stances than O'Toole, so again. To Brown. So for now, Brown is an F tier because he's not in the race, so he physically can't win. But on a higher level, even if he was still in the race or gets reinstated after challenge, I would still rank him F tier, specifically because I do not trust him. He was formerly the leader of the Ontario PC Party. He won the leadership race in, I believe, 2018, before, after a few months, getting kicked out over basically CTV actively smearing him and lying about him, which, frankly, I don't know why he hasn't sued CTV News for slander. Or I guess that's more libel. But that's a whole other kettle of fish. I feel bad for him for that regard. But as the leader of the PC Party, he campaigned as the best is a social conservative friendly blue Tory. So he wouldn't necessarily do a lot of social conservative things, but he respected them. But then sorry about that, but then as a friendly, and as he became the leader, he immediately betrayed the social conservatives in Ontario and said that they were dinosaurs and they're holding back the party and they need to go away and they're no longer relevant in Canada, and started acting like a blue liberal. Not even a red Tory, but a blue liberal, basically parodying the exact positions of the Liberal Party. He never ran an election campaign in Ontario, but I actually genuinely believe he would have lost if he was as the leader of the PC Party in Ontario in 2018, even against Kathleen Wynne, who got pretty decisively routed. Now, I don't think Wynne would have beat him. I think it probably would have been Horwath who beat her, or beat, I guess, Wynne in that case, but also Brown. So then we get to next guy here. We have Poilievre. I think especially anyone who's watched my live streams knows pretty well my opinion on Poilievre. I quite like the guy. I think it's pretty safe to jump him in S tier here. Now, I will say a couple things about Poilievre, but so generally speaking, a lot of the media, Patrick Brown included, and Charade, keep portraying Poilievre as this hard right extremist person. And this is like the most inane take, more than all the other bullshit scandals. Oh, pardon my language. It's like the Anglo-Saxon one, or the Bitcoin one, or the people saying that the World Economic Forum is a conspiracy theory, and he's winking at it. How an organization that publicly exists, publicly has a website, that publicly has policy positions, that leaders of countries publicly support and implement policies of, that has a web page that publicly acknowledges that many members of the Trudeau government are members of the organization, and that many rich and powerful people in the world go to a conference every year and talk about these policy positions, how that is conspiracy theory. I don't understand at all. No one is saying that the World Economic Forum controls people like Freeland, but that as members and supporters of the organization, that they are influenced by its ideas and that its ideas are bad. That is the position. How that's a conspiracy theory, I don't know. It's just literally true. That's like saying water is dihydrogen monoxide is a conspiracy theory. It's like, well, no, it literally is dihydrogen monoxide. But the bigger thing, though, is the portrayal of him as a hard-right, extremist, Nazi sympathizer. It's like, it's inane. Because you look at what Poilievre supports. He is orthodox, Canadian conservative on abortion, guns, climate. What other issues exist? Gay marriage, he's orthodox on that too. He's orthodox on taxes. He's orthodox on spending. His interesting positions. He's also orthodox on immigration. His interesting positions are he wants to fire the Bank of Canada director, Tiff Macklem, for being incompetent, who is incompetent, so that's why that is anything, I don't know. I just actually recently watched a video where a discussion between the two of them in a committee meeting where Tiff Macklem said that inflation or interest rates are not a problem for the average person in June of 2020. And that the Bank of Canada would not raise interest rates before at least 2023. Oh, it turns out that was a lie, considering we've increased our interest rates by 2.25 percentage points. Lie is a wrong word, but that was an ambitious statement, I suppose, is a better way to say that. He wants to reduce the power of government, but that's a relatively orthodox position. So what we've established here is that he has one slightly spicy position. He wants to fire an incompetent bureaucrat. And everything else is orthodox conservatism. He's genuine, and I think it's very safe to say he would do those things, but he's not like a wild conservative. He's an orthodox conservative. He is the mainstream. If you were to put a politician's face on a wall, what is mainstream Canadian conservatism? It's Poilievre's face. That's why he's so popular in the party. He is the most popular politician in Canada, or most popular conservative politician in Canada, because he's the orthodox conservative politician. Like, if you look up orthodox conservative in the dictionary for Canada, it's just Poilievre's face. At the moment, he is the standard you would measure other conservatives by. Are you more or less conservative than Poilievre? He is the middle. So it's just inane. He's by no means an extremist. He's not even particularly remarkable, other than he is very good at explaining himself. He's very coherent, he's very well read, and he's very honest and sincere. But if you remove all of his positive qualities, and you just look at his positions, he's mundane. In fact, of this list, Lewis is more right-wing than him. Mostly on social issues, but generally speaking, is more right-wing. And in a lot of cases, he's significantly less right-wing than the People's Party. Notably, he doesn't want to end immigration or severely curtail it, which is a very big plank of the PPC. So he's very centrist compared to the PPC on immigration. He just doesn't want to touch it. But now we get to Charade. So, Charade is an interesting fellow. Why he's in this race, I don't know. He's not a conservative. I know it's cliche these days to say he's not a conservative, but he's not. You look at what mainstream conservatives in Canada, the grassroots, like and want, and you look at Charade. You look at his record. I don't care that he was a member of the Progressive Conservative Party, because I will note the Progressive Conservative Party is to the left of the grassroots and voter base of the Conservative Party of Canada. So, saying he was, let's say he was even the median progressive conservative in the 90s and 80s, puts him to the left of the majority of the party. And you do see this in polling with 45 to 50-something% of conservative voters having no intention of voting for him if he was leading the party. Which goes to show that he's far to the left of the median of the party. In fact, I would actually say, based off of how he ran Quebec and the policies he ran there and his promises and platform on his website, that he is at best a blue liberal, in that he is similar to Morneau. And in fact, I think he would probably govern almost identically to Trudeau. You could potentially argue he might be more effective than Trudeau, or he would be a better prime minister than Trudeau, but he's going to govern from a similar moral viewpoint, a similar worldview, and with similar policies to Trudeau. Whether he's good or bad at that is a different question, but he's almost certainly going to be indistinguishable from Trudeau from a policy standpoint. So why anybody who is a member of the Conservative Party would vote for him, I don't know. Because generally speaking, unless you are a blue liberal who doesn't like Trudeau, there's no reason to support Charade. Because he is the same thing. If you are not the kind of person who's left the Liberal Party just because Trudeau is incompetent, if you are that person and you like Charade, fair enough, by all means, vote for the man. But if you are anyone who wouldn't have ever voted Liberal to begin with, there's very little reason to support Charade. And personally, if he was running and he won the race, regardless of how he won the race, it looks like if he did win the race, it's because he basically gamed the system and won out basically like Ottawa, Toronto, Vancouver, Quebec, and chased up the areas that have the seats that have the fewest voters in it. Unlikely, but it is potentially possible. I'm not sure if the party would actually survive that, but that's a different conversation for a different time. I think it is very safe to say that if Charade somehow won, I would not vote for the party. I might not vote in the election at all. It depends. I suspect, as my modeling for my hypotheticals would do, that the People's Party would gain immensely. Not enough to win a seat, probably, but still significant gains. But, that said, if you are the kind of blue liberal or potentially red Tory kind of person who thinks the policies of Trudeau are fine, he's just incompetent, Charade probably would beat Trudeau in a general. So there is that. But I personally cannot support him because he doesn't agree with me on anything. Pretty much. In fact, personally, one of the biggest red flags is that he would not overturn any of the gun control that Trudeau's introduced, which is a big personal issue of mine. In fact, I originally joined the Conservative Party as a single-issue voter on firearms, and then no tool betrayed me. So there's that. So with that, Charade gets a solid F tier. I wouldn't vote for him. I wouldn't even rank him on my ballot. If he wins the race, I'm probably not voting Conservative. The only possible reason why I would is if the alternative was like Karl Marx or Stalin. But barring some radical socialist party that could take, or communist party, I do not see any reason to vote for Charade. Federally or party-wise. This brings us to Lewis. Now, I really don't have much to say against Lewis. I like her. I think she's sincere and honest. I agree with her on most positions, though a lot of the positions I don't think are particular, in Canada specifically, are that big a deal. She talks quite a bit about abortion specifically, and I generally agree with her on things like sex-selective abortion and other positions like that. But I do not think that those are particularly important issues at the moment in Canada, specifically because, well, yes, there is no federal rules on the books in Canada, but provincially, presently, there is no province that would actually partake in the procedure after 24 weeks, and most provinces are actually under 20 weeks, I think. The Maritimes, you can only get it at 18 weeks, the abortion procedure. So it's already quite heavily restricted in practice. Legally, it's not, but de jure it is, or de facto it is, in actually how you get the procedure. Which does make it a lower priority. To me, it would be like if... Right. So there's that. And my biggest concern with her isn't any of her positions, isn't her argumentation, or, well, it is her argumentation. It isn't any of her positions or anything. I just am not convinced about her ability to sell her ideas. In the debates I've seen her in the campaign messaging I've seen from her, both videos and emails, she seems... I probably blanked this mostly on second or third language. I don't know how many languages she speaks, but non-native English speaker problems where her position and her argumentation makes perfect sense to people like myself, who are very well informed and look at all these issues on a basically daily basis, because this is effectively my second job, and I basically read the news and all this stuff every day and watch a lot of political commentary every day. So everything she says makes perfect sense to me. But the way it's written and the way it's articulated, I'm not sure how effective it would be at communicating to someone who's not particularly up. Like the people who don't watch political commentary 7 days a week are the kind of people I am doubtful of her ability to communicate to and convey her positions to. Now, to her credit, she's significantly better than she was in 2020. She definitely hasn't taken the last 2 years and the fact that she managed to win election in 2021 as the ability to just hang up her laurels and stop trying. She's much better at communicating, at debating, at public speaking, all these things. She's a lot better than 2020. But is she good enough to win a federal? That is the main hang-up to me. Because it's not just that we're comparing Lewis to people like Charade and Agentson and Baber. She's comparing against Poilievre, who is probably the most effective conservative communicator in Canada. Very articulate, very precise, and very apt at explaining things to the average person in a way that makes sense. She doesn't have to be... She could be good. She could be better than the average person at explaining and still look bad compared to Poilievre. So with that, I pretty much have to put her in A tier. It's, to me, on my ballot, it's kind of a toss-up between where I'd rank her and Baber, because I personally really like Baber in ways that I can't quite articulate. But the way I've been on the fence for the entire campaign on who I'd rank 1 or 2 or 3 there, not that particularly matters because I'm pretty sure Poilievre's going to win on the first ballot, but regardless. But compared to Poilievre, on the main issue that matters, because on some issues, I'll go with things like abortion and school choice and stuff like that. I think Lewis is stronger on them. Her positions are stronger, and I like them more. But on the issues that matter the most to me in a long-term political strategy for Canada, for Canadian Conservatives, I think Poilievre is more effective. I could be wrong. He could pull us a bait and switch, in which case I'm probably just going to walk. I'll have no faith at that point in the party. But assuming he is sincere, Poilievre, and does exactly what he says he's going to do, I think that would be a huge win. Just like in the US, love him or hate him, Trump's biggest accomplishment was mainstreaming conservatives doing things. Trump himself wasn't a very big conservative. He was moderate, actually, if you look at most issues. But he did things. And he made it appealing and clear that you can win by doing things. Because it seems that a lot of conservatives, especially if you look at Boris Johnson in the UK, don't believe you can win by doing conservative things. I think Poilievre is the kind of person who will do conservative things. He's not necessarily the most conservative person in the world. As I said, he's like the mainstream, he's the middle, he is the default conservative, if that makes sense. He's not particularly right-wing, he's not particularly not right-wing. He is just the default conservative in Canada. But he's extremely effective communicator, and I sincerely believe he would do these things. And I think, in a lot of ways, the most effective strategy going forward is to have a leader who will do conservative things and actually accomplish them and govern well. That is how you win. You don't win the idea battle by going, let's say Canada right now, on a scale of 0 to 10, with 5 being perfectly moderate, 10 being perfectly conservative, and 0 being perfectly liberal. If Canada's like a 3 right now, you don't win by electing a 10 as the leader, because that person probably won't win. You win by electing a 7 who actually does things and brings the political center back to, say, a 5. That's how you actually get real change going on, if you are a conservative. So, with that, if you agree with me on these things, if you like my opinions, I strongly recommend you put Poilievre first, though, again, I don't think it's going to particularly matter if you rank him second versus Baber or Lewis. But there is something to be said by winning by a lot. If you disagree with me at all, by all means comment below what you think, your disagreements, if you think I'm off base, or if you think I'm missing some nuance or whatever. I will note, if you do like Patrick Brown, I'm pretty sure it doesn't count as spoiling your ballot to rank him. He is on the ballot, and he might be reinstated. So if you do like him, by all means, might as well rank him. If I am wrong with that, comment below, and I will make a correction video, or try to correct this video if the YouTube will allow me, because I don't have all the access at the moment to the YouTube things, to correct that information. But generally speaking, this is my ranking. If you liked the video, by all means, like, share, subscribe, comment below all the things I already said to comment. Smash that like button. I said that already. But otherwise, I apologize for the delay in posting this video. I took a previous take of this, but I didn't actually really like my commentary, so I re-shot it after work today. With that, though, I bid you all adieu, and hope you have a wonderful weekend. I guess it's not weekend for everybody. It's weekend for me. I have every other Friday off. It's a great work schedule, actually, by the way. But for myself, have a lovely weekend, and for everyone who works on tomorrow, have a good day at work.